Halloween, it's over. We're literally like a week away from Thanksgiving. But that didn't stop me from wanting to make this video and talk about this book. Those Who Hunt in the Night, a novel by Barbara Hambly. Those Who Hunt in the Night is the first of a series about two characters named Asher and Ysidro, a detective and a vampire. The vampires in this novel have visible fangs at all times, and the artist who decided to depict this on the front cover has given Ysidro bright white triangular fangs. And I love that. I love thinking about these vampires walking around like The setting is 20th century London in September. Everything is wet and foggy and gray. And so as I read this book, I decided to keep notes and try to see if I can figure out the mystery before the book reveals it. Along my way, I would come across words that I just didn't recognize or didn't know the full meaning behind. So I actually, as I found those words, marked them in the book and looked up the definition. I'd like to share those with you so maybe you can learn a little bit like I did. I'm gonna read the back to you so you can get an idea of what the plot's like. The back cover says, "Stalker by Daylight. Location, London. Time, the period of Sherlock Holmes. Subject, vampires." The vampires have been living in London since the time of Elizabeth I, but now they were being ruthlessly murdered by someone who ripped their coffins open for the day to burn them to ashes. No vampire could endure the daylight to destroy the murderer. They had to turn to a mortal human for aid. Thus, it was that Professor James Asher, one-time spy, returned home to find his young wife in a strange coma and Simon Ysidro, oldest of the vampire Londons, waiting for him. Ysidro, although polite, left no doubt in his power to locate his spell on the young woman wherever she might flee. Asher must agree to find the destroyer of the vampires for them. But if he found the killer, what must happen then? What would inevitably be the fate of any mortal human who learned the identities and locations of the vampires? The answer was all too obvious. Whether he succeeded or failed, it seemed that Professor James Asher was doomed. How can you not just want to dive right in and read that one? As I began my notes, I was in chapter 4. The story opens with Detective James Asher returning home to find his wife Lydia and all of their house servants in a deep slumber, a magic that belongs to vampires. Our first main character is James Asher. He's an Oxford professor, former spy for the British government, and married to Lydia. Lydia is a beautiful young physician, and she's quite analytical. In his study, Asher is greeted by Don, Simon Xavier, Christian, Morado de la Caneda Ysidro, oldest of the London vampires, mostly known as Simon Ysidro. Ysidro threatens Asher, demanding his help and expertise in solving the latest string of vampire murders. I actually have an excerpt from the book that I really enjoyed. It shows off Ysidro's power over Asher, his vampire skills. It says, "Somehow both arms were wrenched behind him, the wrists pinned in a single grip of steel and ice. The vampire's other hand was in his hair, cold against his scalp as it dragged his head back, arching his spine down toward the floor. Though he was conscious of very little weight in the bony limbs that forced his head back, and still further back over nothing, he could get no leverage to struggle, and in any case, he knew it was far too late. Silky lips brushed his throat above the line of the collar. There was no sensation of breath. Then his lips touched his skin in a mocking kiss, and the next instant he was free." I made a specific note calling this section, this imagery, very erotic. He's proving to Asher, like, I could kill you in a moment. Instead, I will place a gentle kiss on your neck. Like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. I love it. The final passage in these first few chapters of imagery that I found really appealing, describing Ysidro, it says, "The high horns of his forehead gleaming faintly as they passed beneath the lamps of the houses round the square." I think that just shows off his vampire-y widow's peakness. I really liked that. Chapter 4 ends with a shocking discovery. Asher is being tailed by another vampire. Vocab time. Here's the words from chapters 1 through 4 that I found interesting, maybe didn't know, or maybe wanted to look more into to expand my personal vocabulary. We've got lithe, an adjective meaning mild or calm. There is disquieting, an adjective meaning causing mental trouble or anguish, upsetting, or making uneasy. Next is divest, a transitive verb meaning to strip, if you're talking about clothes, to deprive, if you're talking about rights, to free of, or to rid. Another one, infinitesimally, an adverb in infinitely small quantities. Macadam, a noun. Pavement made of layers of compacted broken stone, now usually bound with tar or asphalt. This is something pioneered by Macadam in circa 1820. In chapter 5, Asher ponders if vampires were capable of physical acts of love. Yacirdo informs Asher that vampires have no sex, but can share ecstasy in the kill. There's some more vocabulary that I came across in chapter 5. First is ineffectual, an adjective meaning not producing the desired effect, or without effect. Next is blithely, an adverb meaning without care, concern, or consideration. The next is fauteur, a noun meaning a distinctive odor that is offensively unpleasant. Finally was timbre, a word I had heard before but didn't have a full meaning behind. It's a noun that means a small embroidery frame, usually made of wood or plastic, consisting of 2 or more concentric hoops between which fabric is stretched. In chapter 6, there's a lot of plot and mystery that starts to weave in and out. In this chapter, we meet Bully Joe Davies, a newborn vampire, scared out of his mind. He brings up a few other vampires, Calvert, the one who turned Billy Joe, Grippin, who changed Calvert, Nettie Hammersmith, and Lottie, the deceased vampires Asher is investigating. Bully Joe is convinced he's next to die, and Grippin, master of London, wouldn't want a fledgling roaming the streets without his permission. Asher agrees to meet with Davies the following night at midnight, and I had doubted that Davies survives that long. All the while they're chatting, Lydia is watching from her rooms. She makes the bonkers decision to follow Davies into the night. She isn't sneaky enough and senses someone on her tail. Finally, Asher follows the lead, ending up in the doorstep of an undead Mrs. Farron, or Lady Ernchester. Lots of vocab for you coming from chapter 6. Truculent, an adjective meaning quick to argue or oppose, aggressively defiant. Inexorably, an adverb meaning in a way that is impossible to stop or prevent. Pique, a verb meaning to excite or arouse, especially by provocation, challenge, or rebuff. Also pride, or to arouse anger or resentment in. Next is inchoate, an adjective meaning being only partly in existence or operation, imperfectly formed or formless. Impeccance, an adjective meaning having very little or no money, usually habitually. Next was a word that came up a few times before this, and because it kept coming up, I couldn't resist learning more about it. Costermongers, a noun meaning a hawker of fruit or vegetables. Finally, garish, an adjective meaning clothed in vivid colors or excessively or disturbingly vivid, tasteless, showy. Chapter 7 continues with Thea Farron, or Mrs. Ernchester. She invites Asher in for conversation into her home. She shares stories of her husband, Charles Farron, how they came to be vampires. We learn Grippin's first name is Lionel. He and Yacirdo have the same maker, Rhys the White, a minstrel who was master of London. Asher is attacked by Grippin, who has red eyes. Thankfully, Asher takes some precaution and wore a silver necklace. He takes a tumble but manages to escape, though he doesn't get far before the Ernchesters stop him. So the vampires that are residing in the Ernchester house grab Asher before he can escape. In chapter 8, the couple is working in tandem to suss out the killer. There's some more imagery that I really enjoy here. Quote, her kid-gloved hands emerged like slim stamens of a rose. Lydia learns more about Lotta, the one who has passed away. She was seen as early as an hour after sunset. Sometimes she's pale, sometimes she's rosy. We, as readers, can assume that's from her feeding. She disguised the smell of rot with her perfume. Her eyes and fingernails were odd. So what Lottie would do, this vampire that is now dead, is she would go out and attract in rich and powerful men. She would spend time befriending and getting herself involved with them. I'm assuming sometimes she would romance them, and then when it was time to finally feed, she would kill them, drink their blood, and leave their bodies in these positions that would be embarrassing for their friends and families to find them. So when they were found, people didn't really talk about it. Like, they were dead, but they didn't want to say how or why because of the weird position she'd leave them in. Meanwhile, the Ernchesters steal away Asher into a dark cellar. Chloe, another new vampire we were introduced to, is there. She's flirty and young. Anthea, left to find Isildo. They speak more of life as vampires. Chloe says this to Asher: not when others are around. No matter how bad I want it, not where anyone will know, but no others are around now, and no one will know. He's kind of threatening him in this, saying that there's no one around here now while they're in the cellar. The desperate longing and pining these vampires must suffer. I love their suffering. It's so romantic and dark. No matter how bad she wants it, she knows she can't kill anywhere where she might be found out. Another thing about vampires, this is a quote: even when one is for all practical purposes immortal, age is unsettling. This is said in reference to Chloe, who is reminiscing about people she used to know in her past life who are still alive or have recently deceased. The feeling of aging, the witnessing of that, can be really unsettling at any age in immortality. Asher and Isildo talk some about who they suspect the killer may be, and Asher confronts Isildo, saying, in fact, you think the killer is another vampire. It's not a question, it's a statement. I like that about Asher. He is taking in a lot of information and he's processing it in a scholarly way, and I think he's onto something there. There's one word I learned in chapter 8, friable, an adjective meaning easily crumpled or pulverized. In chapter 9, we learn that Asher is keeping his distance from Lydia. He wishes, though desperately, he could touch his wife, to hug her or even hold her hand. He doesn't allow himself lest the vampires hunt her. Isildo remarks on how many trails lead back to Valentine Calaver. That's the vampire that turned to Bully Joe Davies in chapter 7. There's some really sexy personification in chapter 9. Quote, rain made a faint, brittle whispering sound on the hardened leather roof of the cab. I think that whispering sound that really sets the scene. Like I said previously, this setting is rainy, gloomy, foggy London, and at any turn, Hambly is doing what she can to set the scene and set the vibe, and I think it fits perfectly for this vampire story. Lionel Grippin was a doctor of medicine, and that leads me to wonder if he has it in him to decapitate someone. There are more vocab in chapter 9. We're going to start off with alacrity, a noun meaning promptness in response, cheerful readiness. Next, we have promenade, noun, meaning a place for strolling, a leisurely walk or ride, especially in a public space for pleasure or display. Supercilious, an adjective meaning coolly and patronizingly naughty. Evanescent, an adjective meaning tending to vanish like vapor. Squalid, adjective marked by filthiness and degradation from neglect or poverty. Tawdry, an adjective meaning cheap or gaudy in appearance or quality. morally sordid, base, or distasteful. In chapter 10, there's many clues to the identity of the killer. Bully Joe Davis is dead. I've been very bad at explaining what's happening with these killings. Each killing is following a pattern. Vampires are killed and then brought into some place with direct sunlight, and then as the sun rises, they are charred and burned to dust. Younger vampires like Bully Joe Davies, his bones remain. Some of the clues I picked up on were 2 pairs of muddy footprints, meaning there were 2 people involved in the next murder they stumble upon. The charred remains of Davies with intact bones, a white thorn used to kill vampires. The spine was severed at the head, another decapitation, which is why it leads me to wonder, could it be someone who knows medicine? 5 keys were found in Davy's pocket. The padlock was locked and the hasp was ripped free from the wood, meaning that whoever broke into this room didn't use the keys. They merely ripped so strongly the lock off of the wall that they didn't even need keys to enter. So it's 2 people, someone with inhumane strength pointing towards a vampire, and someone else. Someone suspectedly that can go out in the light. I asked myself at this point in the novel, can Grippin be the killer? Some reasons I suspected him at this point is he's tall enough. The killer has to be large enough to carry these bodies and coffins up into the light. Ysidro and Asher both suspect him, and he's connected to every dead vampire. But then I questioned, who would Grippin want to work with? Can Grippin go out in the sun? What's going on there? Ysidro, however, seems certain that no vampire could be committing the murders, but Asher is considering otherwise. Quote, would it be impossible? Would one eventually, in the span of years, toughen even against daylight? As I write, I suddenly remember Ysidro's hours of operation were more extended than other vampires. So is it possible that a vampire old enough and long enough has become more immune to the effects of sunlight? The duo find Calvaire dead. 5 dead vampires now. Calvaire knew his killer and let him into his resting place by night. Ysidro shares a legend of an ancient vampire, one who strikes fear in other vampires, one from Paris. So this older vampire, there's legends of him. Most of the vampires don't even believe he exists, but he's legend to live in the Paris catacombs among the dead. The duo decide to follow this lead and hunt down the mythic vampire. They travel to Paris pretty suddenly. Asher leaves a note for Lydia asking her just to stay put and wait. They meet and speak to vampires in the hotel. There's new vampires here. There's Elise, Sergei, Francis, Harriet, and Hyacinth. In chapter 12, Ysidro and Asher travel below the streets of Paris and enter the catacombs. That's where they find Brother Anthony, the mythic vampire that nobody believed existed, who believes he must repent for his sins of becoming a vampire. So he was once a religious figure in the community, turned into a vampire, and suffers deeply knowing that he is killed and needs to kill to continue to survive. He believes he must repent for these sins and make up for it somehow. So he stays in the catacombs among the dead and tends to them, reorganizes the bones, and tries his best not to hunt. In chapter 13, Asher gets a paper headline, Savage Murders in London, and learns 9 innocent people were murdered while the duo were searching the catacombs. He's distraught by the news and chooses to risk everything, return to the catacombs, alone and unprotected, and beg Brother Anthony for help. Asher receives no reply, just a poem. I'll read you the poem now. But the silence unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word Lenore. This I whispered in echo, murmured back to the word Lenore, merely this, and nothing more. Asher leaves there the newspaper and books it out of the catacombs for a second time. There's one word in chapter 13 I found interesting. Sibilant. Adjective, having, containing, or producing a sound of an S or a sh, like in sash. In chapter 14, unlucky is Asher, truly because he is assaulted on the streets of Paris by 4 vampires. Alice, Grippin, Chloe, and Sergei. They attack him on the streets and almost bring him to death. Quote, red darkness swallowed him and turned swiftly black. He blacks out in the street. In London, Lydia is restless and paranoid and misses her husband. She's in more danger than she realizes. Asher takes some time to recover from the vampire attack. We learn that Brother Anthony is watching over him unseen and had saved him from death. The killer can't be Grippin or Chloe. We know this because Grippin and Chloe were in Paris alongside Asher and Yashirdo. Meeting someone else entirely did the killings in London. Chapter 15 opens with another article from London. 8 more dead, and the building the bodies were found in was burned. Lydia ponders how long she can wait for James. She thinks she knows the answer. Asher and Yashirdo finally return to London to continue their search. Asher's first stop is Lydia, but she's gone and has been missing for 2 days. A couple more vocabulary words in chapter 15. We've got lassitude, a noun meaning a condition of weariness or debility. Next is recalcitrant, an adjective meaning abstinently defiant of authority or restraint. Susurrant, an adjective meaning whispering or rustling sound. Involuted, an adjective meaning curled spirally, having the form of an involute. A lot happens in the plot between chapters 16 and 19, so much so that I couldn't stop reading to take notes. So I have it all kind of compiled in one big block of words, because once I was done reading I had to stop. Lydia's room is found full of the information she found on the vampires. She found where they were sleeping. She connected their names to the deeds on years and years of property transferring from name to name to name, but it all ends up in the same place under the same person at the end. Asher follows her trail to Grippin's house and is attacked by a monstrous vampire. Chloe is dead upstairs with her blood drained. So there's this huge monster, 6'7", grotesque, desperately thirsty and strong, and has killed Chloe and drained her of her vampire blood. Asher shares his concern with the vampires. Vamps killing and feeding from vampires is a huge taboo. Chloe's blood has been surgically drawn and then drained. It's almost like it's a science experiment. Somebody drained her blood with a needle before allowing the vampire to drink from her. Our newest suspect is the human scientist Horace Bladen, a father of Lydia's previous suitor. Dennis Bladen was introduced earlier on and in my note-takings because he was just like the girl's ex-boyfriend or ex-lover. I really didn't take him seriously. I just kind of thought it was like Lydia lore. But Dennis, the son of Horace Bladen, was deeply, deeply in love with Lydia. He proposed, he wanted her so bad. They went to school together, but he's a bit of a misogynist. Didn't believe Lydia should be in medical school, should be learning. She believed that she was too beautiful for that and should just be like a housewife. And at the time, Lydia turned him down for Asher specifically. Asher's a bit older, but a bit more open, and they just got along better. Asher remains distraught. He needs to find Lydia. The love of his life is missing. At the mercy of a vampire, Asher and Yashirdo set off to Bladen's house. Asher stays outside to rest, still badly injured. He's still recovering from this vampire attack. It's like the next night after his attack. He's weak and ill and needs to lay down outside the house while Yashirdo goes in to investigate. Asher sleeps till nearly dawn, awakes to find Yashirdo still inside. His coat is still where he left it next to Asher. Asher goes in to save him. Yashirdo is in a coffin in a lab as the sun comes up. So now Yashirdo's kind of stuck here at this point. There's windows everywhere. If he leaves his resting place, he will likely just completely burn up. Bladen has the pair trapped. He admits this is an experiment gone bad. His son Dennis is the monster, an artificial vampire. He needs vampire blood to slow his decay and satisfy the hunger. They plan to use Yashirdo to make endless vampires for Dennis to consume, starting with Asher and Lydia. So what happened is Bladen is a scientist working with the British government, maybe outside the realms of the British government. I don't know if they've approved this experiment. I don't think they have. Trying to take and make artificial vampires to make a sort of super soldier to help fight in the war. Bladen believes he's doing good and doing right for his government. His son Dennis finds out about it, and he's a bit hard-headed though, and he believes that if anyone should be wielding these powers of vampires, it should be Dennis, of course. Without thinking and without consulting his father, he steals the vial and injects himself into it and transforms himself into this monster that is slowly decaying. His body cannot handle the transformation. He's desperately thirsty. He's killed 17 people and his thirst is just unstoppable. The only thing that satisfies him even a little bit is vampire blood. Normally humans are turned to vampires by consuming the blood of another vampire. That's a very traditional way, unlike the more Twilight version where you get bit and then there's venom. It's not like that at all. The vampire who wishes to turn you must let you drink their blood. I think that's so sensual and sexy. I love that. Bladen's plan is to keep Ysurdo alive and use him to turn other people into vampires to continue feeding his son while he works for a cure, because currently Dennis is dying. Ysurdo says, he's basically like, yo dude, that ain't gonna work, because there's a physicality to vampirism, but there's also a mental state that kind of gets shifted. They have physical powers as well as psychological powers. They can control minds, they can put people to sleep, they can read thoughts and feelings depending on how much they've kind of practiced. So to turn someone into a vampire, the vampire has to be willing, and the person who's becoming a vampire has to be willing, otherwise it's likely that the transformation will just kill them. It was a crazy 3 chapters. This is where you find out what's been killing all the vampires, and I could not stop reading. There were 2 words that I really found interest in these chapters. The first is embrasure, a noun meaning a recess in a door or window, and the other one is debauch, to cause to emerge. The stakes are really high for Asher in particular because Dennis has Lydia. He's taken her away. Asher and Ysurdo race against Dennis towards where his father has Lydia imprisoned, on a sexy motorcycle, of course. They make it just in time to find her safe. Dennis intercepts their escape party in the courtyard's abandoned chapel, the spot that Dennis proposed to Lydia when they were in school together. It's a struggle against Dennis. He's monstrously strong and he's bloodthirsty. It appears all hope is lost until a vampire materializes. Unhinged and hungry, Dennis attacks the vampire without hesitation, draining him dry and tossing his corpse aside. Dennis moves then for Asher, but before he can do any damage, he drops dead. The vampire who sacrificed himself is Brother Anthony. He's been watching them since they left Paris, following them place to place and eavesdropping. The newspaper that Asher had left in the catacombs must have really spoke to him, and he saw a way to redeem himself for all the bad he's done since stepping into his immortal life. Brother Anthony snuck into Asher's place and found vials of silver nitrate. Just before materializing and showing himself to Dennis, he injected himself with 10 vials of silver nitrate. No other vampire could have done this. Due to his age, the length of his immortality, he has grown accustomed and immune to some of the effects of silver on his body. Therefore, when he injected himself, the silver nitrate did not kill him instantly. Instead, when Dennis drained him dry, he ingested all the silver nitrate that was in Brother Anthony's veins, and it kills him instantly. So Brother Anthony essentially sacrifices himself for our duo, and the mystery of who has been killing all of the vampires in London has been solved. Our story ends with Ysurdo leaving Lydia and Asher in peace, vanishing from their lives. He says, "Don't talk about me, I won't bother you." However, this is the first in a series, so it is set up to continue along with some more hijinks. The ending of this book I just couldn't put down, so I feel as though I am maybe rushed through it a little bit, but I was so excited to see how this story ends. I've really grown to enjoy Lydia and Asher as a couple. I feel like they work well together, and Lydia is not just a damsel in distress, although towards the end you could argue that plot happens because plot happens, and it all feels set up well though. The killer being someone that Lydia knew, it fits so nicely. The puzzle pieces actually kind of melded together, and going back and re-looking at the story, it doesn't feel shoehorned in or a total surprise. All of these characters were established in one way or another leading up to the reveal and the final climax, and that final fight is very interesting, the way they bring Brother Anthony back into it and give him a bit of a redemption. I feel like Brother Anthony's motives felt real and intriguing and satisfying. I did rate this book a 5 stars. Barbara Hambly does a wonderful job of setting the stage and really placing you in the streets of London with the costermongers and the interesting decor and all the buildings. I can set myself in the room, in the cellar, by the coffins, in the catacombs. It all feels very immersive in a wonderful way. I enjoyed so entirely the setting and atmosphere of this novel. Once again, everything is damp, dark, foggy, rainy, or cold. I can think of no better time of year to have read this novel than early fall. Furthermore, I really did love the characters, the vampires, and following the mystery as if I too were an investigator. I don't know that I've tried that before, and it was very entertaining. The vampires! The lore, the pining. It's not just about the romance, it's the torture of immortality. Forevermore, their lives are burdened by the need to feed, so much so that it's better than sex. I just couldn't get enough of it. I definitely think this deserves a 5 star. It's a very quick read at about, what is it, almost 400 pages. I felt like that's a pretty quick read. The ending just flies by. I couldn't help myself but just eat it up. I had a really great time reading this book. I've got some other books that I'm reading that I'd love to talk about more as I get through them. Behind me here, I have Haunting Adeline, a very infamous novel, dark romance, paranormal romance that is horribly written. I am about 200 pages in and I cannot wait to talk more about it. Maybe you'll get to hear me talk and yap some more about those. In the meantime, though, I would recommend this book if you're a lover of vampires and Sherlock Holmes and murder mysteries. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time. Peace out!